Hello out there, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the musical QuaranStream. I am Glen.
I'm Heat Miser! I'm Bri. And happy day after Hamilton.
Yes.
Everybody's very excited. We've had many a conversation about the role of Hamilton in musicals, the role of Hamilton in American history, some of the criticisms about Hamilton.
Yes.
And it's been really kind of like a fun past 2 days of people who consider themselves kind of scholars of theater.
Yeah. And I will say really quickly, a lot of the criticisms of Hamilton are very fair. There are some of them where I'm like, well, it's hard to get into that when it's a 2-hour musical, but there's a lot of very fair criticisms. That said, you should definitely go watch Hamilton on Disney Plus because it's an awesome show either way.
And we're really missing theater, and I think it kind of reminds us of a time where when we really support artists and we really kind of encourage our artists and people in the theater, like that show created so many jobs. It elevated so many people's careers, and so like as a historical piece of theater, that really like showed that this is a viable thing. Like we were talking about a while back. This is the first like taped musical that I think we've ever, first of all, really seen in this type of format, but bought at such a high cost by Disney.
It is not only the most that a distributor has ever paid for a filmed version of a stage play, it is the most a distributor has ever paid for a film that was produced independently outside of the studio system. Period. Yeah. It breaks the record for purchased independent films.
Yeah, so I think if we're thinking about, kind of the real astounding presentation of Lin-Manuel's words and writing such a piece and highlighting the careers of really wonderful people like Leslie Odom Jr. and Renee Elise Goldsberry and Philippa Sue and Chris Jackson. I think, seeing what costumers and prop artisans and, all of these really wonderful folks that kind of created the whole piece and how in-depth they went about, like there's this whole things that come about the character who plays the bullet and the target on stage and all that stuff. So I feel like from a theatrical perspective and what it meant to have President Obama leaving his second term when this came out and everything, it was really powerful and meaningful. Or whether you want to sit there and criticize, the BIPOC representation that really happened in the Revolutionary War, and if you want to criticize the feminist aspects of it, like I think these all can exist all at once. And I think that we can still honor what Hamilton has created and has tried to do as a shift and how far we need to come in the musical theater community. And also, maybe, really go back and criticize, especially on a day like today, our founding fathers and who they were and what this country was founded on, especially in the wake of Black Lives Matter.
And there is a lot. I personally have always been one of those people who's like, well, the solution when you do not care for speech is more speech. I feel that there is room now, thanks to Hamilton, for new shows that discuss a lot of these things, because the morality of history becomes difficult to address in a 2.5-hour show. So when you're doing something that's a biography of a person, and you're taking them from the beginning of their career to the end of their career sort of thing, it's very difficult to look at moments in their lives and go, let's address the moral gray areas that he wandered into in this moment. So I would love to see new shows come out now that are specifically about Hamilton and the deal that is the subject of The Room Where It Happened, so that you can focus in now on this slice of his life and say, this is a lot more complex than a single number in a show.
Yeah, and I think, for me, coming from an educational background, I love the aspect that this is supporting kids who never saw themselves on stage look at theater and, musical theater as a viable option, because I think that representation is very important. But I also feel like it opens up a broader humanities and artistic educational context where, as savvy adults, I think we can parse that Lin-Manuel Miranda as Alexander Hamilton is very likable and very laudable and inspiring, but perhaps Alexander Hamilton's not the best elevated person there. So, being able to kind of look at history critically and being able to understand sources of information and being able to go back and have students analyze that as well is going to be really important. And I think that if I could see any way that the American educational system would change, I would love kind of a more integrated experience in that way where you can see yourself on stage being visually represented, want to go into musical theater, but also understand the history of not only like the show when it was existing in 2016, but also what was going on in 1776 to, the 1800s.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that I want to see more of now that I've been able to see Hamilton and everything is I want to see more of reaching out to people of different backgrounds and saying, we want to see your version of this now. Whether that is someone saying, let's take Tennessee Williams' Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and do it with a Korean-American cast and a Korean-American director who can all take the text of a white man who wrote this and turn it into what is the Korean lens on this. Or whether it's let's find a South Asian playwright and have a South Asian playwright write a play about.
And when we talked about that a little bit with like Om Shanti Om, is we think that that's a wonderful story that almost anybody can kind of get into, but it kind of exists in, Bollywood, which has never really crossed over to musical theater. But how exciting would it be to have a completely South Asian production team and cast to bring a show, and it doesn't have to be that show because that's what we like and we understand we're white people, but, bring a show that would continue that representation, continue folks being able to see, like, this is a viable thing. We've watched a lot of YouTube, and we've watching a lot of Try Guys, and I think we were talking about this morning where Eugene Lee Yang talked about wanting to go to NYU and pitch and go into musical theater, and his mom being so disappointed that the only roles he would get was in Miss Saigon. And he decided, I'm going to go to USC, and I'm kind of simplifying the story a bit, but I feel like any representation that can move the conversation along. You don't have to have a parent worrying for their child that they're going to be pigeonholed the rest of their life in a particular area despite their child's talents. And I think that the more we kind of open up the realm of arts and history and give ownership to everybody and allow everybody a voice that's able to amplify their American experience. I know as a white person, I appreciate it because I know my story. I know my life. But when I can hear diverse points of view and I can hear diverse experiences, it helps me be empathetic, it helps me be compassionate, and it helps me realize that, oh my gosh, my parents were really strict and never complimented me when I got an A. Like, I have a lot of similar, like, immigrant trauma that has been passed down from my grandparents to my parents and to me. So I feel that, we find ourselves through our differences and we find our similarities through that as well. But to sit there and kind of acknowledge all of them is, I think, the very first important step. We can't just say, oh, we have this grand human experience that everybody lives through equally, but the more little bits and pieces we get from people in their own words and through their own experiences is what's really going to help us kind of like complete that puzzle, which I think is fantastic and beautiful and why I love theater.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a place in theater there was a very popular debate in the 70s that August Wilson was really kind of at the center of, where the debate was, should black actors be focused on expanding their presence in white theater? Should black actors be arguing hard for open up these roles in the musicals to us, open up these roles in Shakespeare's to us? Or should there be a focus among black actors and black creative professionals of creating black American theater and saying, no, this is our experience, we want to see our experience on stage? And I feel like that's actually a very valuable debate to have within a community. I feel like the problem is right now, in the current scheme of things, we don't really have space to have that debate because we're not seeing either one. We're not seeing increased opportunity for non-white actors on the stage, and we're not seeing increased opportunity for POC communities to actually build their own thing.
Well,
and I want to see us build to where we can have that debate.
And it's getting even worse because of the pandemic.
Yes.
Plenty of fairly long-standing, reputable theatrical and artistic organizations are shutting down because there's not the support of the government. There's no way that audiences can really kind of grant their supports. I know a lot of our friends and family were buying season tickets just to kind of keep things afloat, but without that injection of things like the WPA, it's really impossible to keep American culture alive while we're trying to keep ourselves alive. And I think that that's one of the big things that, how can we open these things up when we're still being kind of regulated as, arts is not as valuable, when many of us have turned to arts first as helping us get connected and to stay connected during the pandemic.
And we're seeing culture, for as long as I have been alive, culture has been used as a bargaining chip. Oh, well, you want this, well, give us half of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting's budget, and we'll give you this over here. So we're going to slice that in half in order to force our way on this and sort of thing. And I just saw a story about that recently. I forget which community it is, but there's one of the communities that has seen significant Black Lives Matters protests, where the leaders of that community, the local government, have responded to those protests by increasing the funding of the police, $775,000 for next year, and slashing the budget of public libraries in their community by $750,000 in order to pay for that boost in police budgets. And it's like, I know that I am an artist and a culture person, and I write books, I write music, I write poetry. I am the artsy-fartsy guy. And I know that for my entire life, I am now sick of seeing arts and culture be a bargaining chip. And I want to see us recognize that this is actually a part of our society that needs protection and needs support.
Well, and I think that we came up with you came up with a really good solution this morning. Is we were very excited about the statue coming down in Richmond, and we would really love a statue to come down in our own community in Thompson Park. And we love going to Ix Art Park.
Yeah.
And there is a giant statue of a butt.
Yes.
What could be more wholesome and loving and wonderful than butts, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, we would prefer to take one butt down and put one butt up, because then we're supporting local artisans.
Yeah.
We kind of have a cool thing in the area that could be a nice little tourist attraction, and it won't have anything to do with racism. No. It'll just have everything to do with butts are nice.
and I feel like that should be a thing across the board, not necessarily butts.
But, different things that are nice.
Think of the iconic modern statues, things like love. Everybody knows the love sculpture. Everybody knows the bean. It's like every city that is large enough to fund a public art project should have a public art project that is not, let's pay tribute or homage to some horrible racist, or even let's pay homage or tribute to any person in particular. Instead, it should be like, we want a thing that's as iconic as the love statue, even if that is a giant butt with a love tattoo on one cheek.
Yeah, I said about the only thing I would really like to see is there's also this real historical statue right in the middle of a major cross section in town, and it's really well known for Lewis and Clark, and in fact there's like a Lewis and Clark building, but I was like, I wanted to just be like Sacagawea by herself. Yeah. I feel like that woman, it's her time to shine. I would love to see a statue of her, but that's about my only person I want a statue of right now.
Well, and I've got to say, when we first moved here, Bri, who has lived here before, mentioned to me, like, take a right at the Sacagawea statue. And in my brain, I was like, where is there a Sacagawea statue in Charlottesville? And we got to the statue, and for the first time ever, I realized that this statue of Lewis and Clark, Sacagawea is in the statue. She's crouched behind them. And I was just like, that is not fair. They might have died without her support. They definitely would not have been able to complete their mission without her support. Like, and her recognition in the statue is she's crouched behind them.
She should be out front, baby, by herself.
Yes.
And I said, and they can keep the building name. You know, I'm not going to sit here and like, you know, expect everything at once.
Yeah.
But I would like it to just be a statue of her. I think that'd be super neat. And I think that, you know, we've thought a lot about, you know, we're literally down the highway from, you know, Ash Highland, Montpelier, Monticello. And in fact, I was told we'll see fireworks from Monticello if we go to our local grocery store parking lot. We can probably see them if we want to. And I think that it's kind of given us a lot of things to like think about. You know, for me, I think it's really, you sit and you think about our country was founded on racist principles, and nobody did enough to really kind of break those down. And so I'm really kind of shocked that people are surprised that they're still existing when things in banking and things in housing, things in where you work, that this was all part of the initial setup. It was, you know, it was a feature, not a bug. And I think that there is still a lot of work to do. And I think one of the things that I have realized as a white person, you know, every single time we complain, well, why is getting a loan so hard? Why is renting so hard? Why are things that also affect us? And I think the root cause is really racism and sexism. Is once somebody can be successful enough to afford something that white people don't want them to, all of a sudden it's now, well, let's move the bar, let's move the goalpost. And so I think, for me, a rising tide lifts all boats. And if we can make a more equitable and just country, nation, really eliminate racist and sexist policies from banks and property and all those things. Like, I like to think that there's enough for us all here. We have one of the largest nations, one of the richest nations, with enough like unclaimed land that I would just like everybody to kind of have something for themselves.
Yeah, and I guess if I was going to try to extend the metaphor, perhaps mangle it in the process, a rising tide lifts all boats. Damming the river to block water to one community chokes everybody downriver.
Yeah. And I think that we were thinking as well, like, you know, there's so many things that people want to elevate or say, you know, we need this, but, you know, the things that aren't going to save us are going to be these symbolic gestures, right? You know, we don't need a statue, we don't need, you know, things taken away or things renamed. We need actual change. We need clean water in Flint. We need money going into poor communities to help elevate poor communities to being not survivalist, but able to live on a universal basic income.
Dismantling the machinery of white supremacy is a complex issue, and it takes genuine work on dismantling that machinery. And the problem with putting up a statue of Martin Luther King Jr. or renaming a street in your town Black Lives Matter Boulevard is that it's a recognition of the issue. It does nothing to genuinely dismantle the machinery of white supremacy and correct the issue.
And save people's lives.
It just makes white people feel good about, well, now we have a statue, now we have a street.
Yeah.
And that is not a thing that needs to be done right now. If your community can do that and focus on dismantling the machinery that has oppressed people throughout the years, more power to it. Sure, put up the statue and do that. But too often, things like that have been used as a band-aid to assuage white guilt without genuinely...
Oh, we're done now.
And like, what are you talking about? This community is racist.
We have equal statues. We have equal names. So we have, like, you know, David Duke Boulevard and Martin Luther King Boulevard.
We gave you Marcus Garvey Public Library. Shouldn't you feel happy about that now?
Yeah, that's not the type of equality we need here.
No.
And I think that we all kind of got thinking about this, and I know we're kind of getting on our own soapbox, right?
Yeah.
We've got thinking about this because as much as we all love, like, Chris Jackson singing and being a strong, powerful person in a position of leadership, and we loved the remix with Barack Obama, there's still some really horrifying things that George Washington did.
Yeah.
I was like, I mean, it's so shocking to me that Jordan Peele was the first person to be very overt and just blunt about horrors that occur in these racial types of divisions. Because, you know, Glenn was telling me, like, George Washington had his slaves' teeth ripped out to make other people's dentures. I was like, that's Saw. That's Hostile. That is horrific. That is a horror movie. And so, you know, as much as I can love Hamilton and love Chris Jackson and love Lin-Manuel Miranda, you know, really being critical is like, treating people as property. And sometimes that might be hard for us to kind of wrap our minds around. But I was like, it's no different than me being like, I'm going to rip off the tiles on this wall and put them over there because they belong to me. And that's a horrific way to treat another human being.
And that was one of the things where it's like, I think the craziest thing about history that I've learned recently, I said, is that we don't have any record that George Washington pulled slaves' teeth to make dentures for himself. What we have record of is the fact that George Washington did have slaves' healthy teeth extracted to be sold to a local denture maker, and that George Washington himself owned at least 2 pairs of dentures made from human teeth. So there is at least the likelihood that George Washington's teeth contained the teeth that were extracted from his own slaves. That's messed up. And that is a genuine part of our history, and not a part of our history that was taught to a lot of white people when they were growing up. I grew up near Rocky Mount Living History Museum, which was an actual historical plantation that was restored to its original form, and where they would teach classes on there and everything. One of the things they talked about was George Washington was friends with the owner of Rocky Mount and would come visit often, and they had like a portrait of George Washington there. And they would be like, oh, you may have heard that George Washington's teeth are made of wood. Well, that's not true. They do make dentures out of wood, but I assure you, Mr. Washington has a set of dentures that's made out of ivory. And it's like, okay, so as kids we were taught, oh, they were made out of ivory. So tusks from elephants, not great, but not, for the time period, not bad and everything. Except George Washington had multiple sets of dentures. One of them was made out of ivory. 2 were made out of human teeth. Yeah.
And I was like, and not to kind of like end our one experience on this, but I do want to kind of get to, before Glenn starts his pitch, about Shakespeare, because that's the other thing I like to watch in quarantine.
Yes.
So I think Coriolanus with Tom Hiddleston is coming up with the National Theater.
Oh, okay.
So that's something that I think that a lot of people might be interested. Before you kind of saw him in like Loki and all that stuff, it might be kind of a cool thing. Coriolanus is not something that's done fairly often. It really examines war in a kind of a really hard way. So I think that, if you're looking for something that's not, a history and maybe something that's not a comedy, it is kind of a drama that I think might be kind of interesting. So I definitely encourage people to check that out. Also, the American Shakespeare Center, which is real close to us, has opened up an online season. So they're going to actually try to produce shows, and they're going to do 2 shows that you can watch from home. Going to be appropriately social distance. And when I read them, I'll be honest, I looked real quickly, and it was Othello and Twelfth Night, and I read it as Otwello Nye, and I'm like, what is Otwello Nye? And I had to go back and go back through my feed, and I'm like, oh no, it's not like this new combination of Othello and Twelfth Night, although now I really want to see that.
All right, so I guess we should leave behind our discussion of politics.
But you guys continue the conversation.
Yes.
Please, we hope that this has started some ideas for you to talk about with your friends and family while you're stuck at home, or if you'd like to make some comments down below of, maybe what are things coming up for you this weekend, maybe what are things coming up from you viewing things like Hamilton during this weekend, and, how it kind of relates to what we're experiencing now. We know that we live in a very small echo chamber right now. It's just both of us being like, I agree.
Yeah.
Which is nice and pleasant and should be sometimes, for your partner. But it is something that, I really miss being in a broader theatrical community and artistic community where I can learn from other people about this type of stuff. And so I feel like if you have something to say, or if you want to kind of continue the conversation, please feel free to do so, either in our comment section below or with your own friends and family.
Yes, absolutely, because these conversations are important to have. And what I was starting to say was, we should move on from this political conversation and get into my pitch for this play, which is going to be an inherently political conversation.
Well, politics is everything.
Because I started looking at the book I chose and being like, oh, you know what? this is going to be a highly politically charged show if you do this show properly.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate from our program. We both went to Virginia Tech, and one of the things Virginia Tech was really known for was this critical thinking in theater, and also like theater for social change and that type of stuff. So a lot of times when we approach art, it's really from that perspective of not only who wrote it and what was kind of going on with that person, and then what themes were they trying to do or say, but also what was in the context politically, socioeconomically, location-wise, like whether it was like a Japanese play or American play. And I think that we start looking at things very critically in that aspect. And I know that we're currently on YouTube under the Film Optimist, and you have some really fantastic Film Optimist things coming up about considering political and socioeconomic issues with like a Murder, She Wrote episode. And I think that that's really kind of neat. It's like nothing really exists in a vacuum. And if you're a great artistic scholar and a scholar of history, you know, you realize everything's about money, everything's about politics.
Yeah, and we've spoken in the past on this show about the value of fan fiction. And I feel like there's two things we need to be encouraging for people interacting with art. Because it shouldn't just be consumption of art, it should be interaction with art. Fan fiction covers the creative end of interaction with art. And I feel the other thing we need to be encouraging a critical thinking interaction with art. We need to be encouraging, I saw this piece of art, now what has that told me I need to now go and look into beyond that piece of art? And I think my subject for today is a good thing for both of those. Because what I'm discussing today, Bri previously discussed the bully pulpit. With the story of Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft. A play that I feel would go very well into a season with something like Hamilton or something like that, where you're covering history. I am covering a book by Michael Lewis called Flash Boys. And I have two different ways that I see a show based on this book going. But I'm going to start out by saying the thing I like about this book following up the Bully Pulpit. The Bully Pulpit is a historical piece. It examines the implications of what went on in the past, but ultimately it is a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You can look at this and you can break it down to the basics of show this event, show this event, show this event. Flash Boys, as a piece of journalism, has characters and a story that you can follow for the characters, but it is a book that ends at a point of, and we don't know really where this is going because this is all still going on. So Flash Boys is an examination, a journalistic examination of what high-frequency trading did to the economy in the United States. And it is seen through the lens of interviews with people who essentially acted as whistleblowers within the financial industry, and how they wound up being treated by the industry, how they tried to take action themselves to correct the issues within the industry. And at the end, you have a number of these characters have bound together to form a company that's designed to bring fairness back into investment. But you're left with a very uncertain future. This company requires people to buy into it in order to make the industry more fair. But why would the industry as a whole buy into it if it means that they're not going to make as much money as they did in the past? So, like I said, I feel like this is a very inherently political show. So I see two different formats for this show. I see one that is your standard musical, which could be Hamilton. It could be How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. It could be this story of these people within the industry and how they do all the crazy adventures they have. I'm more inclined to take it in a direction of the musical review, along the lines of Stephen Sondheim's Assassins.
Ooh, that would be fun.
Giving these characters individual vignettes where they get to tell you their story.
Mm-hmm.
And then perhaps as the play progresses, the musical numbers start bringing the characters together until we see, here's what we're trying to do in order to make things better.
Mm-hmm.
So, for those of you who have never read Flash Boys, it's a great book. It's very in-depth, very thorough, but also very accessible and very easy to read.
You know, for a second I thought you were going to go into, for those of you who haven't seen Assassins, I'm like, everybody's got the right to some sunshine.
Everybody! Not the sun, but maybe one of its beams.
One of its beams. All right, there's our musicals, bit for
Yes.
the QuaranStream. But please go on
Yeah.
into back describing the book. I'm sorry for getting us musically off track.
It is all right. The book is about, like I said, high-frequency trading. Now, what is that? Well, what Michael Lewis goes through is investment in America used to be a public utility. The New York Stock Exchange was actually a public utility like the power company, like the water company. It was maintained for the public good. And this is where a lot of people still get their image of what happens in stock trading. Is you had Wall Street, you had all of the brokers on Wall Street, physically on Wall Street, rushing to the phones, getting orders from brokerage firms, that sort of thing. And there was this human element to the way the stock market worked. Was it perfect? No. There was always room for exploitation and that sort of thing. But ultimately, you had human beings gathered together in a single space, actually conducting the business of business.
While you keep describing, we promised this would be a pizza
Oh,
party.
yes. And Bri is... I, of course, am going to be talking. That would be disgusting,
I'm
me
going to
talking
enjoy
with
a
my
piece
mouth
of
full.
pizza.
But Bri can definitely enjoy a piece of her pizza here. This is Wegmans pizza.
We love Wegmans.
It is grocery store pizza that is awesome pizza. And if you live anywhere near a Wegmans and you haven't tried their pizza, go get a Wegmans pizza. It is great.
And even, I'm eating one cold. It's good cold.
Yes. It's good cold. It's good reheated. It's good fresh out of the store. And hashtag not sponsored. They haven't paid us to say any of this. But, okay, so you had this human element. In the early 2000s, the New York Stock Exchange was privatized. And with privatization came also modernization. So now, yes, there's still the stock trading floor and brokers running around there, but it's primarily, as Michael Lewis describes now, a tourist destination. It's sort of there as like this, yeah, we're here with the New York Stock Exchange. And companies send their representatives to ring the opening and closing bell and everything. Mm-hmm. But the actual trading of stock does not take place on the floor now. Mm-hmm. The floor just controls the opening and closing of trading days. The brokers actually work digitally now. Mm-hmm. And working digitally has also led to a lot of automation of how brokers work.
I think, like, if we think back on when we pitched Jumpin' Jack Flash,
yeah,
like, Terry's job was kind of the last bastion of human interaction with those trades and those switching monies and stuff like that.
She was there at the point where it was still human, but computers were taking a larger role. Mm-hmm. So you could have, and that was the thing, was computers got installed in the New York Stock Exchange in the early 90s. But they were like having phones on the floor of the stock exchange. It was still a human broker who had to go to the computer, get the message from the brokerage firm, turn around and say, I want 200 shares of X for this much money. Once the stock exchange was privatized and modernization came in, you had the room for algorithmic trading, which led to high-frequency trading. High-frequency trading, there is no human being required. The computer can be set up with an algorithm, watch for X, trade Y. Mm-hmm. So, and there are two things that this has done that have endangered our economic system.
Mm-hmm.
And I apologize to anybody listening who is genuinely an economist or genuinely works on Wall Street, who's going to listen to my explanation and be like, that's not how it works at all. That is why comments on YouTube videos exist.
Yeah.
Go into the comments,
Yeah,
drop some knowledge. I will listen to the knowledge you want to drop. And rest assured that if I was moving forward with an adaptation of this show, if anyone wants to pay me for that, I'll be doing a lot more research and talking to a lot more experts about what are the intricacies of this. But basically, high-frequency trading has made it so that the money that goes into a company from investment doesn't genuinely stay in that company. You invest, then you pull that money out. It's buy, sell, and it is literally a matter of not even nanoseconds, but microseconds. A fraction of a second.
That way you're not missing any deals based on how slow your human broker is.
Yeah. And the other thing it does is the investment has always been like, well, the value of investment is not just money going into a company, but also investment gets people a good deal on their money. So they put in money and they get a return. This is, you see the return. If you get a return from your investment, you're seeing the return like that. You're not holding on to anything and seeing a return from the growth of the company. You're seeing a return from the algorithm found me a really good way to make like 20 cents on a dollar real quick.
And I think that's kind of the problem of why, the stock market is not really a good indicator of the economy anymore, because, I actually took some of, my grandfather left me a little bit of money, and I keep it in the stock market, and I'm told as an individual consumer, keep it there until you really need it when you retire, because it's a numbers game. You want to keep your money in the market for 35 years, and in the hopes that when you retire, it'll be much, much better than it was. And that's kind of like, I would say, boomer advice, because boomers actually did have that experience where if you left your money in the stock market for 35 years, then, of course it will do better, because they were able to have kind of like these gains in inherent growth and wealth. But I think for us as millennials, it's a much more risky strategy. But at the same time, like, I'm still doing it because I was like, I do know that my interest rate in my bank is not as high as potentially a stock market gain could be. But this is like very, very uncommon, especially with flash trading and especially with savvy investors and savvy consumers on this, because they will be, tuned into it every day. They will be very knowledgeable about what they're doing, but a lot of the things will kind of come down from that like algorithmic programming as well. So I feel like the average person, if you're worried about like going to your job and taking care of your health, it's probably not the best thing for you. You have to have some amount of privilege and education in order to be more successful at it than, say, like me.
And it is, and it is one of those things, one of the cores of Flash Boys, one of the people who is very much profiled in this book is a man who began his life as a trader on the actual floor of the exchange. He started out in the Canadian exchange. And then the bank that he worked for sent him to America to oversee the establishment of their American investing wing after the New York Stock Exchange had been privatized. So he got to see old school stock trading and investment in corporations and investment for long-term growth and everything, and then came into America and was plunged directly into high-frequency trading. And what he saw was, he was like, hey, he's like, the guy like me who is tuned into the market, I can't even be guaranteed success in this market, because the instant you go into high-frequency trading and investment tools and investment properties and things like that, he's like, your knowledge of the market doesn't matter anymore. Because the instant you act on your knowledge of the market changes. And go ahead.
No, I would just say, and I think that's why a lot of people are saying, we're seeing this unprecedented time where we've had this pandemic, and so many people, not only just workers and stuff like that, but also then people who've made investments or stuff like that are all really suffering. Because like it's almost like you're not even really playing with real wealth when it comes to the stock market anymore.
Arguably, the stock market went from being the driver of capital and industry. Once it was privatized, it became the world's largest slot machine. You got to put your money in, spin the wheels, and see what comes back out. That's what it became. And I'm going to use this guy really quickly because this is actually a musical number that I see in the show. For him, the revelation in how the market had changed was he was given software where it used to be, you put in the order goes through. And they were like, oh no, we've streamlined the process now. So you put in the order, you click this button, your order goes out instantly. It's no longer like orders go out every hour, orders go out every 10 minutes. You see the order instantly and you see like the ripple effect. And he started noticing, I put out a buy order on a stock that I'm looking at and I see this looks like, you can purchase it for this much and everything. And he said, I put out the buy order, and the instant I put out the buy order, all of the lower end sales evaporate and are replaced with higher end sale margins. And he talked to IT about that, and he was like, I'm seeing this happen, and they were like, oh, you've got to understand, events in the market change the market from second to second. You've got to understand this And he was like, no, I understand that. I know how the markets work. My entire career has been in the markets. He's like, I'm saying it is directly reacting to me clicking the buy button. And he finally got a group of IT engineers up into his office, and he said, okay, look, he's like, you see this? This is a low-frequency traded stock. It rarely moves. It moves by like pennies at a time. And you guys have watched it with me for the last 20 minutes, and you've seen it has not changed. He's like, here's my buy order. I'm going to put in the buy order in 5, 4, 3, 2, and he hits the button, and the price of the stock skyrockets instantly. And he said, this is not the market reacting to events. I am the event. Me clicking that buy button was the event. And he said every IT technician standing in that room instantly was just like, oh my God, what's happening? And I want that to be a song. I want the song to be, I am the event.
You know what? And I really like that with your initial idea of something like Assassins, because if you've never seen Assassins, it is based in a carnival.
Yeah.
And it's basically looking at the famous assassins who have attempted or successfully assassinated U.S. presidents. But the way that it is it looks like a lot of these are playing games of chance for fame, for wealth, for justice, and whatever, they kind of felt. And it was kind of designed in this environment to kind of give a better feeling for, kind of the media circus, and also like, what it kind of means for, luck and circumstance and fame and all that type of stuff. So I like the idea of like, if you were to take that Assassins type of theme and put it in like a casino.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
the floor of a Vegas casino.
Yeah, that would be kind of cool. I was like, I think that that would relate to a lot of people who maybe feel that Wall Street or, kind of market lingo or jargon might not necessarily be understood, but I think a lot of people, especially since like Las Vegas is a very popular family vacation destination, that you can kind of talk about it in terms of slot machines and roulette and blackjack, and kind of terms where, even if you're not necessarily good at gambling, I think everybody has some sort of buy-in to what gambling is.
Yeah. And especially if you're sticking to the games of chance, the slot machine. You can even have a song specifically on the casino theme, This Ain't Poker. Like, poker is a game of skill. Poker involves a lot of skill and mathematics and things like that. Chuck-a-Luck is a game of chance. Slot machines are a game of chance. So having that moment of, we thought we were playing games of skill, this is a game of chance. And that is across the board. That runs through this book. The number of people Michael Lewis talks to who are like, we genuinely thought the stock market was under our control. We genuinely thought the stock market reflected the world as it was. Until someone showed us or we chanced upon a thing where we realized there's no skill involved in this anymore. It is chance. Two more things in particular I want to talk about that I feel are things that need to be part of this show. There is speaking about the IT technicians who witnessed him do this. One of the people who gets profiled was a computer programmer who, after he graduated from school, was hired by a company to write the algorithms used in flash trading and high-frequency trading. So he was writing the algorithms. And he said to him, it never occurred to him the real-world effect of his algorithms. It never occurred to him, the algorithm I'm writing now will have this effect on the market, which will have this effect on someone's business, someone's home, someone's retirement. He said he just thought of it as solving interesting math problems. Which we
And that's why STEAM education.
Yes.
Not just STEM education.
Yes. So he was like, I've done a great job. I'm solving these incredibly complex mathematical issues. I'm creating this software that addresses all of these theoretical things that I learned about in my computer class, and I'm putting them into real-world practice, and it's so amazing. And he said it never occurred to him how important the work he was doing was until he was fired by the company. And he walked out of the company, wasn't committing industrial espionage or anything like that, but he was somebody who frequently took his work home with him. Within, I think, a month of being fired, his home was raided by police officers executing a search warrant on behalf of this company that was charging him with industrial espionage because they said, well, his computer has some of the work that he did for us on it at home. And he wound up serving time in a federal high-security penitentiary for having work that he did for that company at home on his computer, which got him high-security time because it was seen as a threat to the economy that he had this information on his computer.
Well, and you just think of how we all are now working from home.
Yeah.
And how there's such an expectation of, if you work for certain companies, that your time is their time no matter if you have your own time.
But he was like, this was the first time. He's like, I had never considered the possibility of my work has like such a drastic impact on things that in the wrong hands it could destroy the economy completely. He said, until I wound up in a federal prison because of it.
Yep. The other thing I was thinking of is, now I've never been to this casino, but Pittsburgh opened a casino.
Yeah.
Not when I really lived there, but I think I think it was there when I was there in like 2010 or something. But one of the games is, have you ever seen the chicken?
Oh yes, I've heard about the chicken. Yes.
I feel like that would be a really fun, like a callback or something. It's like, bring out the chicken.
Yes, like a chicken scratch song, basically. Yes.
Yes, because like the whole thing is like, you bet if the chicken can do like tic-tac-toe, or you bet if the chicken will land on a certain thing. And basically, like, it was a thing. I just remember, like, I think my sister went and she was telling me about it and how that was real popular. Look, it's a chicken! I can bet on a chicken! And what the chicken's gonna do!
So here's the other thing, and this is where I feel like this show has a lot of opportunity to sort of dig into these things. Because, like, I do not have these songs written yet. I might work on these songs as a concept album or something. After I finish the Absent-Minded Professor concept album. But
and you're Nancy Drew.
It ties into, like I said, the guy who was like, I am the event.
Yes. I think that's powerful.
So the whole investigation began. Michael Lewis's investigation began with a bank spending millions of dollars to essentially dynamite its way through mountains in Chicago to lay fiber optic cable heading to New York.
Mm.
And it is because the way high-frequency algorithmic trading works, like I said, it becomes a matter of microseconds. The speed of light actually calculates into how these work, because you're using fiber optic cable which transmits data by light. And Michael Lewis in his research found like companies that were paying a fortune to a server farm located right next to the New York Stock Exchange to make certain that their company's server was located on the wall closest to the stock exchange, because the microseconds of difference in how their transactions were handled getting to the stock exchange's servers made all the difference in beating out the companies that were on the opposite side of the server farm. One building's width.
Yeah, I think that's so frustrating, because how many times have we worked from home during this pandemic and our internet has gone out completely?
Yeah. And here you have companies dynamiting mountains to build corridors.
Yeah, public resources, public land.
It has an effect on the genuine ecology and environment in which you live. Almost as much of an impact on the ecology as the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yeah, I've always wanted to write a play called The Beauty Line,
Mm-hmm.
which is something, it's like the last row of trees that they
Yeah.
leave to hide the mountains that they've all torn down.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to write it, but I think it's just a really fascinating, interesting concept that more Americans should really be interested in, because this is public land. This is like all of our land that we pay taxes for and everything. But yet companies are making money off of it.
Everybody talks about Bob Ross. I love Bob Ross. Mm-hmm. But think about the scenery that Bob Ross loved to paint. Mm-hmm. Sure, it all came out of his imagination and his brush and everything like that. But he was basing that on the beauty of nature if you go to West Virginia. Mm-hmm. The disappearance of mountaintops changes that radically. Yeah. So, his idea...
It's not places that we access. It's not like this is for a turnpike that we all use. This is for private companies making more money. Yeah.
So, there's another character that I feel needs a song, which is a man who they profile, and he's fascinating. And he winds up being a part of the company that they try to create to fix things. But he went to school. He went to an Ivy League college on a scholarship. He was fascinated by the stock market. And he was very good at the stock market. He never got a job as a broker, because all through college, what he was told and what he saw was that he was from a poor Irish American family. And people like him, he was told, never can make it as brokers, because it's too much of an elitist boys club. Like you're from your brand of white American is the wrong brand of white American. You're still not allowed in the country clubs. You're still not allowed in the secret societies. And the fact that you're a scholarship as well here, you're never going to make it, because they only want to do business with the people that they can go on skiing vacations with. So instead, he focused on the technical end of things. And what he got to be very good at was servers and fiber optic cable. So he was involved in a lot of these last mile solutions for these companies of that server room, can you cut us 3 inches off the cable from that server room to the New York Stock Exchange? And he made a lot of money building those last mile solutions, being paid to him by the people who didn't think that he was good enough to work with them in a brokerage firm. But as an IT person, his value was like unsurpassed. And then sort of the relief he felt when he got contacted by someone who said, I want to start this company and I want us to find a way that where the server is located in the room doesn't matter. Find a way to end that last mile advantage. Find a way so that everybody on that last mile has equal footing. And just like it was this relief, this tidal wave of relief for him of, you want me to find a way to slow this down so everyone has equal footing? Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Yes, I want to work on that. So I think his story would be very interesting. And I'll try hard to make this the last thing that I'll talk about.
It sounds really. I mean, like it sounds. This
Yeah.
is one of the good things about it, and one of the bad things about it is it's very complex.
Yeah.
But I think that it is a way that this impacts a lot of Americans' lives, if not
Yeah.
all Americans' lives.
Mm.
And I feel that whether you invest in the stock market or not,
Yeah.
I feel that if you can find like a great way to make it accessible through musical theater and really kind of express some of these more complex issues, then I think that's going to be really good. But I was like, I can totally understand why you need all this time to kind of explain what makes it interesting, why this is going to work, and then how you're going to do it.
Yeah, and so I'll bring in something here. I'll try to make this the last thing I talk about on this pitch, because it is a subject where I'm like, you might have 2 or 3 songs on this in the show. But they talk about the existence of, once you privatized the whole movement of money, you got what they call dark pools, which is a very sinister sounding thing.
Yeah, not dead pools, dark pools.
Dark pools. Dark pools is a very sinister sounding thing. The initial explanation of it is not all that sinister. The implications of it turn very sinister. So basically a dark pool is, you have the New York Stock Exchange, you have all of the stock markets and everything, which is the larger pool of trading. A dark pool is any bank or investment firm. Let's just, for a name, let's throw out Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch says to people, hey, if you open your account with us to invest through us, we have this dark pool, which is essentially walled off from the rest of the investment market. And when you put out a buy or a sell, before it goes out into the wider market, you'll have this small pocket of investors who can look at this trade first. And you might get a better price on any sale you want to make or any purchase you want to make, because it goes out to this small pool first and they can respond to it first. And then if there's no response within the dark pool, we let it out into the larger pool and the larger group of investors gets to see it. So not all that sinister when you hear it. It's kind of inside circle.
Yeah, it's very unfair. It's kind of insider trading.
Yeah, but it's still just like, well, we created a little room where you enter. The really, really sinister implications come from, so you have an account with them, you get into the dark pool, they then also turn around and sell access to that dark pool to the high-frequency traders. So it's like, hey, you're doing high-frequency trading? We'll let you into our dark pool to see what all of our investors are doing before the rest of the market can see it, and your algorithm can work based on our dark pool and the larger market.
Well, and I don't know if this was discussed, but, what traders are these high-frequency traders? Are they national? Are they international?
You find both of them. A lot of hedge funds have high-frequency trading involved.
Because I think that that's kind of the bigger thing, is if we're saying the stock market is really kind of a good measure of the American economy first, and then maybe the global economy, because the American economy is such a strong indicator of that, there would definitely be very easy ways for bad faith international actors, I mean, even bad faith national actors, but bad, like, for some amount of espionage and, taking America down through trading.
And so now I'm going to try to explain this as best I can. Because this is another one of those things where it's like, if you're an economist or a Wall Street person and I'm getting this all wrong, YouTube comments exist for a reason, explain it to me.
Or tweet at him.
This is the explanation I put together from what I read in the book. So traditionally, when you're selling or buying on the market, well, let me preface this by saying, the whole value of the market is supposed to be. You invest in the market, your money goes into a company, and then if something really good happens with that company, you can sell at a higher price and you get a return on your investment. So when you buy or sell, essentially what you create is you create a bracket, all right? And let's say my left hand over here is the purchase. It's a purchase order. You have your lower end of the bracket here is the lowest amount that you are willing to pay to purchase a share of the stock. the higher end of the bracket is the highest amount of the price. All right?
Yep.
So, over here on the right hand, we have the sell order.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing. So it's the lower end of the bracket is the lowest amount you're willing to sell for.
Mm-hmm.
The higher end of the bracket is the highest amount you're willing to sell for. And you can set it up, very frequently people do, so that there's no genuine higher end of the bracket. Like, you're willing to sell it this low, but you'll take any purchase offer above that. All right? So these go out into the market. And traditionally, the way it works is you have your sale and you have your buy. And the brackets, if the buy is below the sell, nothing happens. No sale is made. When the buy bracket reaches up around the sell bracket, the sale takes place at the lowest point that they intersect.
Mm-hmm.
So if your buy bracket is like halfway in the middle here,
Mm-hmm.
you are buying at the lowest point that the seller was willing to sell. If your buy bracket reaches up above, you are buying at the lowest point you said you were willing to buy.
Well, as a sell, I'd be upset with that.
Well, yes,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't you though? But that's the way the market worked for years.
Mm-hmm.
Was we don't go for the highest, it's the lowest. The buyer gets the best deal out of this that they can. And the seller, if the buyer is above your minimum that you were willing to sell for, you be happy with the good deal you got more than you were asking for as your minimum.
If they were willing to pay more, I want them more.
Yeah.
I want to negotiate that.
Then you're going to absolutely love high frequency trading.
Yeah,
Because,
wait.
because here's what happens. Like I said, you get a good deal as the buyer when you set your bracket. It may not be the best deal because you might wind up paying your maximum if your maximum matches up with the minimum that the person wants to sell for. But generally speaking, you get a good deal as the buyer. And the seller is supposed to get a good deal because they're supposed to set their minimum at, I feel like I'm getting a good deal if I get this. All right? So what happens with high frequency trading is the sell order goes out, the buy order goes out. The buy order hits here, and right in the middle, there's the low end of what the sell would be. So the sell should then go to the buyer at that low end sell price. That's not the way it works in high frequency trading. In high frequency trading, sell order, buy order go out in dark pools. The algorithm picks up on it. The algorithm buys from the seller at their sale price, their lowest end sale price, and then turns around and relists it as a sell order specifically calculated to hit the top of the buyer's price. So suddenly, the seller is getting their bare minimum that they asked for. Always, 100% of the time. They never get more than the bare minimum they asked for. The buyer is always paying the top price that they were willing to pay. They're never getting a bargain down where it's down and lower to the lower end price they were willing to pay. They're always getting charged the highest. That point in between is where high frequency traders make their profit. And you might look at that and go, well, that might be a difference of like 15 cents. But a difference of 15 cents
For
thousands of times an hour for 24 hours a day.
And there could be positive feedback loops where it keeps buy, sell,
Yes.
back and forth until woo.
Yes, until it spirals right up. And it never makes a trade unless there's a buyer that's willing to buy for that. And this is where you get things like that sudden shocking plummet in the market. Is an algorithm is off by a couple of decimal points, and suddenly you have high-value stocks being sold for pennies because the algorithm freaked out and was like, unload, unload, unload. And
you know what? Having worked in big data, that program is critical. Like, you do not want to get a semicolon out of place.
Yeah.
You got to really make sure your program is great, and that's why, like, my job with doing big data was just double checking stuff.
Yeah. So the whole idea then is the market was supposed to act as this conduit between the seller and the buyer. High-frequency trading found the way to insert itself in the middle of that and act as a middleman where previously you never needed a middleman. And as a result, they've highly increased their own upward mobility in terms of money while damaging everybody else's ability to move upward through this sort of investment. So if you're not a high-frequency trader in a market where there are high-frequency trades, you are losing. You are constantly losing. You're either constantly selling at the lowest price that you are willing to sell at, or you're buying at the highest price you're willing to buy at. And there's never that room where there was in the past. We both get kind of a good deal on this.
Bummer.
Yeah. And I feel, like I say, this is a very complex, very in-depth thing where I'm like, this would be 2 or 3 songs.
Yeah.
But I would want songs in this, and this is where I feel like the Assassin's musical review works a lot better for this, is being able to say, we got to take some time. Sort of like Stephen Sondheim takes a song for, it takes a lot of men to build a gun and 1 man to use it. That you need a musical number of things are not the way you think they are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and a middleman is supposed to add value in a transaction. And Michael Lewis says a lot of the people he talked to who do high frequency trading are like, well, that buyer would never have been connected to that seller if not for us in the middle. And he's like, the problem is, that's not true. That buyer in a dark pool would have eventually been connected to that seller in the broader market a few seconds later.
Yeah.
But by jumping in place in those microseconds of dark pool activity, they're able to make a whole bunch of money by taking those few cents in difference.
Well, one of the things is if this ever becomes a reality, I'm going to go ahead and push my alumni school, New School for Social Research. That's an amazing economics department, and I would be like, you should definitely use them as a resource. And if anybody's thinking about going to the New School in New York City, I highly, highly recommend it. I love them. I had a great time there, and I think the graduate programs are second to none.
Well, and you know what? Michael Lewis, if you'd like me to make a musical based on this, and New School, if you would like to help me develop it, I would love to work on this show, because I think that we need more work in the popular theater, in musical theater, and professional theater that is journalistic theater. We need more theater that is designed to say to people, no. This is how things are going on around you now. And
it is impacting you. Like, I feel like, unfortunately, the society we live in, it can't just be ignorance where, well, I didn't know. That's not an excuse when it comes to things like economics or politics. Like, you don't have to be an expert in them. You do have to, know that it does impact you. It does affect you, which is frustrating and sad for those of us that's like, well, I never wanted to go into economics. But I feel like because that's what provides our immediate and generational wealth, something that we have to learn how to participate in as adults, unfortunately.
And here's the thing. Journalistic theater, I understand, as long as it is in the moment, it's journalistic theater. But once the moment has passed, or a solution has been found or something, then what you've got is a period piece. It isn't a show that loses its relevance. It is still a show that says, in this period in the 2020s, life was like this.
Well, and I'd rather see a piece like this or like Anna Deavere Smith than something like Mike Daisy. Let's just be honest.
All right, so that's the show that I wanted to pitch today. Michael Lewis's Flash Boys, I think, would make a great musical. There are lots of other shows that I think would be great about economics in politics and that sort of thing, like All the Devils Are Here. I believe you should go. Everyone should read All the Devils Are Here, which was about the next to most recent financial collapse in the United States.
Yeah, we've
We-
lived through a lot as millennials,
Yeah.
haven't we, folks?
Yeah, being a millennial means you have lived through at least 3, possibly 4 major economic collapses in your lifetime. So, I think it's the mortgage crisis.
Right.
That's the one that it
2008.
focuses on. I think that one has a lot of great characters and stories that people should be hearing about.
Yeah.
Especially since that one wound up being blamed a lot on consumer
people.
level people.
On average people. And I think average people are still really negatively impacted by it.
And it's a wild story because it's also a story of you think of the people who got blamed, but it's a story of brokers at major mortgage institutions forging consumers' signatures by sticking one form on top of another, literally on the Coke machine in the office and tracing it.
I'll be honest, I remember, I'm not going to say what bank it was, because I'm going to at least try to retain anonymity there, but I remember logging onto my bank because I have never made a ton of money. I've always needed to check my bank account, but I remember logging onto my bank one day, and there was there's 2 more accounts here, and I had to call them and say, cancel those accounts.
Yes. And you had one company that, I'm not going to name names, but it is named in the book. You should go read All the Devils Are Here. But one of the financial institutions that was really driving this at some point looked at their own books and said, well, this doesn't look good. And they took it to the Federal Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, hey, can you check our math on this and see if it looks bad to you too? And the Federal Reserve looked at their books and said to them, oh, you guys are screwed. He said, and it's really bad because not only are you guys screwed, you've screwed the whole economy. So here's what we're going to need you to do. Take these steps. These will not save your company. Your company is gone. We're sorry. We can't help you with that. So you take these steps, though, and maybe individually, you guys will be all right. And when your company goes under, you're not going to drag the rest of the economy with you. So you guys can then go to other companies and be...
They're too big to fail.
And their response to this advice from the Federal Reserve was, they did the exact opposite the Federal Reserve told them to do, because they said, oh, well, if we're big enough to tank the economy, but not big enough that they feel the need to stop us from tanking the economy, let's get even bigger as fast as possible so that they'll have to step in and save us if we start to go under.
Which is why I think so many people during this pandemic are very frustrated that the airlines, that the banks, that everybody has gotten bailouts except the average person. And I know we've talked in the past that our stimulus checks went right into stimulizing people. We gave a lot to local businesses instead of shopping at big stores.
Yes, we bought this hand sanitizer
from a private business in Atlanta. She was great. We basically sat and did everything. And to be honest, we've talked about if we got another stimulus check, I'd replace the air filter in my car. I'd do more to fix up the house faster. So I feel when you give money to average people, it's less likely to be stored away in offshore accounts. Yeah. It's less likely to actually be kind of stagnating the economy. But unfortunately, it goes to all these big corporations. And I don't even think it goes back to the people who are getting the planes off the ground or working in the banks or anything like that.
And see, here we are now. Well, we've seen a lot of the banks that were given money in the mortgage crisis bailout, given millions and millions of dollars, were told to use that money to soften the impact of mortgages going under. Try to keep people in their homes, try to keep people solvent, try to do your best for this. The vast majority of them took that money and used it to buy other banks. Yeah. They used it to get even bigger.
Well, I always say it relates to kind of my own personal life. The space we're in now burned down about 2 years ago. Yeah. And I remember going to the banks and we kept trying to go through it and say, hey, our unit is a hole in the sky right now. There's no property here to really pay anything on. Can you guys help us out? And the process was so infuriating that for 2 years we kept submitting new stuff and new stuff and new stuff, and it was never enough, that we just ended up paying our mortgage on nothing that was here. Like, it's not designed to help common people. And I was fortunate enough that my parents were able to help me out through that, because we were living in another apartment and paying like half of the income I made to that. And so it was one of these things that if I was responsible for both of them at the same time without any additional help from my family members, I would not be eating for, the past 3 years.
Yeah, you would either not be eating, or you would be homeless on the streets because the bank couldn't drain any money from you anymore.
Be bankrupt.
Yeah.
But what we could be doing is we could be eating some pizza.
Yes.
So we might have to leave you very shortly here.
Yeah.
But thank you for tuning in. We'd love to hear your comments on, all the economic crises we find ourselves in. Hey, if you feel like this is something you'd like to see, or maybe some other very complex topics in math, economics, accounting, finance.
If you are in a college
politics,
theater department and you found this video on YouTube and you're like, I would love as a college theater student to work on developing a show like this, talk to your department and tell them that you know a guy who's willing to be an artist in residence. And I will develop this show with you. All right? Cool.
We're going to eat pizza now. Bye!
All right, love you guys. Until next time, take care of yourselves, because, we're not there to take care of you.